Hello, everybody. This is Fernando for the latest Godzilla podcast. I wanted to talk about this because there's a potential tie-in when it comes to the news that leaked a couple of weeks back with regards to Gareth Edwards no longer being associated with the sequel to the Godzilla 2014 film, and now the new news that seems to have come out the other week or so with regards to his Rogue One, that Star Wars spin-off film, essentially having a huge assortment of reshoots being done in order to quote-unquote, I guess, satisfy some of the executives there within Disney. And so it was, let's go back a little bit in time, to the couple of weeks back. There was the news, like a bombshell all of a sudden, that Gareth Edwards will no longer helm the upcoming Godzilla 2 sequel. And the reason for it, it still seemed kind of mysterious, but it was the idea that he was finishing up Star Wars Rogue One, that he had just, of course, did the Godzilla 2014 film, that he wanted to go back and focus on smaller films. I'm including a link, by the way, to movieweb.com, which I'm getting a lot of this information on because it was a nice article. It summed up everything all in one place. So with regards to that, I thought it was a strange thing. Like, why would somebody who went from one big movie, Godzilla, to another even bigger movie, in this case Star Wars, now all of a sudden want to go into quote-unquote smaller films? Well, now that the news has come out that Rogue One movie is facing a bit of pandemonium of sorts, there's the idea now that maybe he was removed, and I'm just coming up with this hypothesis myself. I could be completely wrong, but there's the idea that maybe he was removed from the Godzilla 2 sequel only because it seems like there's much more behind the scenes drama happening with Rogue One than is being let on. For example, every single movie, of course, goes through reshoots. It's just natural. In fact, it's encouraged because whenever a movie is being made, there's so many angles coming up into one single direction that eventually when the movie is completed, at least preliminary completion, and then it's looked at, you can see what works and what doesn't, and then that way what doesn't can be trimmed off and maybe replaced with reshoots. It's just standard. It makes the movie a better experience for the fans thereafter. But in this case, it's huge in that at least 40 or 50% of the film is being reshot. And the reason for it is because apparently the executives at Disney are really worried. This film is taking itself way too seriously. There's even been the quote running around the internet that it's considered more of a war film, like that's the kind of tone that it has, than a Star Wars film. In fact, here's a quote from an unnamed insider. Gareth's work on the first Godzilla shows he can handle a big studio blockbuster, but Rogue One has fallen short of what J.J. Abrams did with Star Wars The Force Awakens. So Disney has ordered the reshoots. And if you're talking about reshoots, again, maybe 10%, 15%, 20%, that kind of stuff is standard. But when you're dealing with almost half of the movie itself, something else is completely wrong. Here's another quote, by the way, from it. It says, the execs at Disney are not happy with the movie, and Rogue One will have to go back into 4 weeks of expensive reshoots. 4 weeks. That's not something that's light. And the reason for it is because the article states that it's been reported that Edwards likes to keep studio interference to a minimum, but that in this case, Disney is definitely not playing around. They're not just letting him only have complete access to the movie. No, this is Star Wars. This is probably, arguably, the biggest franchise in the world. So whenever you have something like that happening and it's coming back, let's say with negative, I guess you could call it testing with panels, those people, those focus groups that watch these movies very, very early on and give their opinions, then that's why they're going through all this trouble. So how does this tie into the Godzilla sequel? Well, it goes to show that Edwards may have been putting in a position where he doesn't want to necessarily change things with the Star Wars film. He didn't want to go and change a lot of stuff that he had placed within the film, and then so Disney stepped in on their own, and maybe Legendary decided, you know what, that could be bad for us too, because what if he decides to do the same thing? It's hard to say because the article states that Edwards has refused to comment with regards to anything involving the Rogue One. I guess you call it not a disaster, but it's the Rogue One turbulence that's been happening right now. So maybe they didn't want all that drama and all that commotion within the Godzilla 2 sequel as well. Who knows? That's just my theory. Because when you're dealing with someone that is, let's say, really good at what they do, but they still do not budge when it comes to getting other ideas henceforth, then that could be an issue. Obviously, in the first Godzilla sequel, he was almost, I'm sorry, the first Godzilla film, the 2014 film, he was almost given like free reign to do anything and everything. Obviously, it took like 4 years just to even get the writing going. I mean, that's the free reign that he was given. But in this case, with it being Disney, in this case, it being Star Wars, that's not going to happen when it comes to someone having complete control like that. If something is not testing right, then it's going to be changed. And so that's what I think. That's just my theory, that the way this is playing out with Rogue One, it was being kept a secret. Not secret, but it was being kept hidden in the sense that not too many people wanted it to spread. But when finally the decision was made, you know what, half of the movie is going to have to be remade, I think that that influenced Gareth Edwards being removed from the Godzilla 2 sequel, the one that's coming out a little later on. So I think that was a tie-in of sorts, because now Legendary and others don't necessarily want that same thing to happen to them, because that stuff is expensive. It doesn't say the pricing of what these reshoots are going to be, but getting all those actors together, you're going to have to pay them probably extra for it, no doubt, because they already finished their film. And so they're being brought back to shoot essentially another sequel to the sequel. And when that happens, you have to build all those sets back up, and you have to contract all those effects and all those people to do things again. That is expensive. So that's the thing that I fear. That's the time that I believe is for whatever's happening with Rogue One with the Godzilla sequel. So let me know what you guys think. Agree, disagree? It'll be interesting to see if this guy Gareth Edwards truly does go back into smaller films. Another thing too that I wanted to mention, maybe there's even another looser tie-in, but maybe the studio doesn't want what happened here and also what happened with that Fantastic Four film. You know the one I'm talking about, the one that just was released, I think it was last year. That was another case of another director, I think his last name was Trank, where he was someone who started off on really small film and then was given a huge film, but then refused to just, I guess, work with the studio. And so there was a lot of interference that was happening, and it didn't necessarily create the best movie possible. And then when it came out, it of course bombed. Like, it just completely imploded and it made no money, and then everybody loses. So I think that's what they're trying to avoid here too. So anyways, it'll be great to hear what your responses are. So alright everybody, thanks again as always. Take care.